Welcome back to Fox Eyes on the Hill Live this Sunday morning. You know, former President Donald Trump has been spending a lot of time lately talking about raising tariffs on imports to levels not been seen for about a century. So what impact would this have on consumers and the economy? And what are Kamala Harris's plans for tariff? Let's find out. Will McBride is the vice president of the federal tax at the Tax Foundation. It's a nonpartisan group focusing on tax policy. Well, I got to admit, I really thought about tariffs since, you know, 8th grade history class, where it figures prominently, though, in this country's history about how we do business with other nations. So let's start with the Trump plan first. What is his plan for tariffs? Would that help U.S. manufacturers, or would that hurt consumers?
Well, you mentioned the word dramatic. I'd say that's a pretty good description of it. It is a dramatic increase in tariffs like we haven't seen since about 1934. That's our estimate. So back then there was a push at the beginning of the Great Depression to raise tariffs, the Smoot-Hawley tariffs. A lot of historians say that's contributed to the Great Depression.
Everybody's reaching for their old history hardcover books right now because that was a pivotal moment of the way we dealt with other countries. When some of the critics have looked at this and said, well, if you do this, you're going to wind up raising higher prices because these tariffs would just be passed on to consumers. What was the effect of those tariffs back when the U.S. moved in that direction previously?
Well, even the strongest advocates, people like President McKinley, way back a century ago, who advocated for tariffs, in the end regretted it explicitly, said it was unprofitable. Trade wars are unprofitable. And so the lesson was learned, but only over the course of several years, that through retaliation, other countries retaliate. And this is indeed what happened when Trump raised tariffs in 2018. China, other countries immediately retaliated, meaning they put taxes on U.S. exports. American farmers were directly affected. They had to be compensated for their losses. And, you know, so it was a loser. It was a loser for the American consumer, the American, you know, businesses, et cetera.
One of the arguments for it has been that if you place tariffs on these companies and say that you'll only get them removed if you remove your manufacturing here to the United States, or to punish companies that are stealing intellectual properties from U.S. companies. Does that hold up? Do higher tariffs necessarily generate more manufacturing here in the U.S. or prevent other countries from stealing intellectual property?
There's certainly a grain of truth to that, and we can see it, for instance, I mean, this is not the only way to restrict trade. There are quota systems we've used in the past, so quotas on imports of foreign-produced cars. Have over the years, certainly really beginning in the 1980s and 1990s, caused those manufacturers, Toyota, Honda, others, to locate their factories in the U.S. You know, there are plants all over particularly in the Southeast, plants in the U.S. That doesn't happen overnight. That's costly, of course, to build a new factory somewhere in the U.S., move the workers, the technology, et cetera, to the U.S. There's a cost to that transition. But it does, on the margin, it creates an incentive to move some of that production to the U.S. But there's a downside, right? You're raising cost. Those cars, for instance, are now more expensive. The American consumer pays that cost. Or if businesses are buying those products, those businesses are facing higher costs in the U.S.
What is Kamala Harris's take on tariffs? Does she have a plan to address this inequity?
Hers is more passive, I would say. The Biden-Harris administration inherited the first Trump tariffs implemented in 2018, and they didn't do much about them. They actually continued them and raised them a bit on a few products coming from China, solar panels and electric vehicles in particular, most recently. So it's sort of been passive and then a little more, okay? And so we can expect more of the same from Kamala Harris if she's elected, but this is very different than Trump. Trump would take it about 10 times higher than he did in 2018.
We're flat out of time. Will McBride, thank you so much for joining us from the Tax Foundation. We'll want to check in with you more as we move through this season and this issue as well, too.
Great.
Coming